your faces, unfortunately, or the chat while I'm doing the presentation. So Maggie's going to be helping me out. If there are any comments in the chat, please feel free to put them there and she'll let me know, because I won't be able to see them, unfortunately. So before we start today, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that Humber College is located on the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, known as Adubagok, the place of the Alders, and Mississauga language. The region is uniquely situated on the Humber River watershed, which historically provided an integral connection for the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples between the Ontario Lakeshore and the Lake Simcoe, Georgian Bay regions. Now home to people of numerous nations, Etobicoke continues to provide a vital source of interconnection for all, and we acknowledge and honor the land that we are walking on. I'm not walking there today. I'm actually at home, which is not in Etobicoke, but I am in downtown Toronto, where we also have similar heritage and the moccasin tracks of our ancestors and the footprints of future generations to come. And I encourage everybody, there's a really cool app run by a startup. It's called Whose Land Is This? And you can actually take a look at the history of the land that you're on. It makes the land acknowledgement a little bit more actionable, because you can take a look at the treaties and the history of who has lived on the land that you're on now. So I always invite people to take a look. Started by an innovative group that I had the pleasure of hearing from once. And I think that it just gives us a way of kind of putting our land acknowledgement in action. So it's called Whose Land? It's an app, and I encourage you to take a look if you have some time and you're interested. So today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. I'm here from the Center for Entrepreneurship at Humber, and we're going to be talking about advising students for the future when it comes to entrepreneurship and the face of entrepreneurship today and going into the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what entrepreneurship is. It might seem like an obvious topic, but hopefully you'll walk away with a few new ideas. I'm going to try to break down some of the persistent myths and stereotypes that you might have heard or might have and hold yourself, and talk about what the face of entrepreneurship looks like now. From there, we'll start looking a bit into the future. What does the future of employment look like, and why are we even talking about advising entrepreneurially? How can you help support students who do tell you that they're interested in starting their own ventures or businesses, and where you can refer students in the future if they tell you that entrepreneurship might be part of their journey. So to start with, what is entrepreneurship? I like to use a really broad definition personally. There are a lot of different ways to define entrepreneurship. There's no really agreed upon way to define it, but I like to use a really broad definition that kind of encapsulates and includes as many people as possible. Entrepreneurship to me is a process that starts with somebody, the entrepreneur, recognizing that there's an opportunity and creating something new. I keep it as simple as that because sometimes different groups are left out of our definition of entrepreneurship or don't see themselves reflected in that definition. And I think it's important that all students who may be innovative or may have ideas, may have seen opportunities to create something new, are able to see themselves reflected in that definition of entrepreneurship, so that they know it's something that they can access and that the supports that are out there for entrepreneurs are there for them as well. So at the Center for Entrepreneurship, we see entrepreneurial activity as the generation of value through economic activity. And that's usually creating a new product, a new process, entering a new market, something like that. So I'll talk just briefly about my own journey and why I'm talking about this today. My background is actually in the fine and performing arts. And my undergraduate degree and the certificate I took following that were all in performing arts. And so I worked for about a decade as a performing artist, actor, singer, performer. And it was I pretty much lived the stereotypical life that people think of when they say things like the starving artist. I was chronically underemployed. I would get a gig and it would last for a certain amount of time, and then I would go, a spell without work and have to find other opportunities, bouncing around between a lot of part-time work to supplement my main income. And it was a really tough lifestyle, as I'm sure most people are aware. It is a tough place to be. And for me, I was really unhappy with that underemployment. I was really unhappy working, retail or waitressing here and there to make ends meet. And I really felt that I could do something that would be more fulfilling for myself. And so without any business background or any knowledge of entrepreneurship, I started my first business, which was called Brick and Mortar. And I opened a small little theater space, just a black box studio theater. And the original plan was to have a space that I could do my own work out of and teach classes and things like that, but that I could also use for income to rent out to other artists and provide them with equipment and support to start their own kind of, practices. And before I knew it, this business ballooned. I had 5 locations across Toronto. I had recording spaces, video production spaces, theaters, all these locations. And I realized that for me, entrepreneurship was a really amazing way forward because I could be creative, I could be in the industry that I loved, but I could also have a sustainable career. And for me, that was a way to kind of feel like I was moving forward with my life in the industry that I had trained in and with the work that I loved, even though employment wasn't really an option for me. And I think that this is something that a lot of our students are going to be facing as they leave their degrees and go out into the workforce trying to find that first job, is that sometimes it can be really challenging. And even when you do find employment, underemployment is still a massive issue. So entrepreneurship for me was a way to be able to have a sustainable lifestyle that didn't look like the hopping around and the underemployment. And I think a lot of students are going to be facing a similar journey. So that's why I just kind of mentioned how I got to this point. Prior to Humber, I worked at University of Toronto where I taught entrepreneurship, and now I'm proud to be here at Humber working at the CFE and hopefully guiding other students on their startup journeys as well. And since starting that first business, I then started a number of others, all in kind of the social impact and mostly animal welfare, actually, space. So that's a little bit about my personal journey and how I found entrepreneurship. And since that point, began learning more, training, and really diving into the entrepreneurship space as a way of, again, kind of providing that socioeconomic support to diverse groups who otherwise may not be able to access entrepreneurship. So when we talk about myths and stereotypes, I see images like the one on the left every day. If I'm scrolling on LinkedIn, if I'm scrolling on Instagram, I see all these images that tell us what an entrepreneur looks like. And he usually looks something like this, a white man, usually, dressed something like this. And we kind of have this perception around what an entrepreneur should look like. Typically young, male, white, typically have a lot of money to start out. We associate entrepreneurship as well with pretty specific backgrounds and industries. So a lot of times we're thinking about engineers or computer science developers. We see entrepreneurs as people who take really wild risks, people who have no fear and are willing to bet it all and stake it all and are motivated to make a lot of money. And we also assume that they have some sort of business background or business education. But this actually couldn't really be further from the truth when we look across the entrepreneurial landscape, especially here in Canada. So right now, when we look at business ownership at the graph at the bottom, we do see it is still quite male dominated. Women only own about 16% of small medium enterprises in Canada, but that is rapidly changing. The fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs is women, and especially Black women entrepreneurs. You can also see that Indigenous folks are starting business at increasing rates, and all this is expected to grow and to continue. So some of the little stats at the top there, we know that young people under the age of 35 are increasingly starting businesses, as well as seniors over the age of 55. And in fact, people in that category, the over 55, have one of the highest success rates. When they start a business, it tends to work out and they tend to have success. So that's another area of focus for the future. We know that newcomers to Canada are increasingly starting businesses faster than Canadian-born entrepreneurs. And like I mentioned, women's entrepreneurship is growing around 3 times faster than men's entrepreneurship. So probably this landscape that you see in this graph at the bottom is going to be rapidly changing over the next few years. A lot of government supports, funding, changing landscape of industry trying to support this change of who entrepreneurs are and what access they have to supports is probably going to rapidly accelerate that change. So we know that recently there have been a lot of funding for women entrepreneurs, increasingly funding for Indigenous entrepreneurs, and funding in different industries that we haven't funded as much before. So for example, social impact, social enterprise, environmental, these are spaces that tend to be women-led. So we're going to be seeing a lot of change in that in the coming days. So in that myth slide, I talked about what we think about entrepreneurs. One of the things being that they are driven to start a business because they want to make a lot of money. That, in fact, is pretty rare. Most entrepreneurs that I talk to, that is not a main motivator. In fact, I don't think I've ever met an entrepreneur whose main motivator was to make a lot of money. Of course, we want them to grow a sustainable business that does have economic impact, but really the main motivators for most entrepreneurial students or those who are thinking about starting a business is they're looking for more autonomy or flexibility. This is another reason why we see women choosing entrepreneurship more and more, looking for opportunities that fit their lifestyle a little bit better, especially if they're on maternity leave or have children at home. This is often when women will start a business. Looking for self-fulfillment, looking to have something that for me was what it was when I was underemployed and looking for options for myself. I wanted to feel fulfilled and happy in what I was doing. So that's really one of the main motivators for me. To contribute to society. So we're seeing more and more social enterprises starting, more and more businesses that have a focus on doing great things for our communities or for our planet. And then finally, that underemployment, essentially needing a way to sustain yourself and using the skills and the things you have to try to create that for yourself. So in terms of those myths, some of the other myths that I mentioned is that we tend to think of entrepreneurs as being in tech and computer science and engineering, but of course all sectors and all industries are represented and in entrepreneurship. And studies actually show that students coming out of liberal arts programs tend to be more successful in the innovation sector. Could be related to the training that they have in creativity and thinking critically and looking for opportunities. So there is no limit on which background will work for entrepreneurs. In terms of being a big risk taker, of course, being an entrepreneur is risky, but entrepreneurs actually take very calculated risks and try to mitigate risk taking as much as possible. So using research, getting advising, talking to mentors, using everything at their disposal to actually take as small of risks as possible. Successful entrepreneurs don't actually like taking risks. So we don't necessarily have to be looking for somebody who gets a thrill from taking a big risk in order for them to be a good entrepreneur. A lot of entrepreneurs don't have any business or entrepreneurship background. That's why places like the CFE exist. Most universities or colleges have entrepreneurship centers. Most municipalities and cities have entrepreneurship support systems. And that's because we see a lot of people coming to entrepreneurship from diverse backgrounds, diverse industries. They may be an expert in their field or have a passion for something that they want to bring to market, but they don't have that business background. And so they're able to kind of access that training and support from places like the CFE. And in terms of disposable money, I would say this is still the biggest challenge. While it may be a stereotype that entrepreneurs have a lot of money, it definitely doesn't hurt if you have access to money. Accessing funding, especially for underrepresented groups, is still one of the biggest challenges in entrepreneurship. But that is changing as more funders, government funding is becoming available for diverse groups to be able to access entrepreneurship. So why are we talking about this today, and what does it mean for our students? In terms of the future of employment, they are saying that the current generation, Gen Z or whatever you want to call them, are the most entrepreneurial generation yet. We also know that employment rates after graduation are dropping. They began dropping after the last recession and have never really recovered. At this point, especially with COVID, I think we're going to see some pretty drastic issues for our young Canadians. We know right now about 12% of young Canadians are underemployed, but I think the more interesting factor is that about a quarter are underemployed. So when we just look at unemployment at 12%, we think, that's not as big a number, but a quarter are underemployed, meaning that they're not using the degree that they have, or they're not using the skills that they have, or they're not working enough to really make ends meet. So even if they do have a job, it's not really in their field. It's not really what they were hoping to do. And because of these statistics and because of the way it is, more and more students are turning to side hustles, starting something on the side to help them either supplement that underemployment and help make income, or to finally start pursuing the field that they wanted to enter. So maybe they're not able to find work in their field, but they're able to have that side hustle that uses their skills and the knowledge that they gained in their degree and their program, and having that on the side. Gen Z also has more access to resources, technology than any other generation before. So Gen Z has access and knows how to use really well things like social media to be able to reach more people, or e-commerce. Starting an Etsy shop or starting an online shop is more accessible than ever to our younger generation today. So if you are talking to a student who's interested in entrepreneurship and thinks that entrepreneurship might be, oops, I did skip a slide. I thought maybe I did. I was being a bit glitchy. There we go. So if you are talking to a student who's interested in entrepreneurship or thinks entrepreneurship might be for them, what are some of the things that we want to be looking for in terms of transferable skills that we want all of our students to have? More and more, I'm seeing the trend that entrepreneurship is becoming a literacy that even employers want to see students have. So they're looking to see, have the students had experience? Do they know innovation and creative problem solving skills? Have they been given challenges that they have to, do critical thinking and come up with solutions? Whether a student wants to start their own business or work in the traditional workspace, maybe as an intrapreneur, entrepreneurship is becoming a literacy that all students really need to have access to. And that's because so many of the skills are transferable. So some examples of that: public speaking. A huge part of being an entrepreneur is being able to communicate your ideas clearly, feeling comfortable talking in front of audiences of different groups and stakeholders. So public speaking is a huge one. Interpreting data. A large part of especially growing your business is knowing how to collect and interpret the data available to you. Collaboration, of course, this is a transferable skill we see in a lot of the programs that we have at Humber. Collaboration with different groups of people, different stakeholders, and especially dealing with ambiguity, which I think, especially in the rapidly changing time that we're living through right now, is going to be more and more a skill that all students are going to need. And it is especially true for entrepreneurs. We are always dealing with ambiguity. We never know quite what the future holds. And I guess it kind of comes back to that risk taking and being comfortable with not knowing what the next step is necessarily going to look like, but also knowing how to use research to get as close as we can to mitigating that risk and using the tools at our disposal. So we want to prepare our students for the uncertain future and for the future of what work might look like. So what does that look like? What does it look like to be an entrepreneur? What is the lifestyle of an entrepreneur? I have this little graphic on the right that I saw. I think I pulled this off Instagram. It is definitely very true. A day in the life of an entrepreneur. You can go from absolutely the highest high of being so excited to absolutely at the bottom and thinking that everything is a failure, and you can get there quite rapidly, like within one day. So when somebody is looking at entrepreneurship as a potential lifestyle for themselves, they need to look at, can they handle those ups and downs? Are they comfortable with that kind of, again, ambiguity, but also do they have the tenacity to kind of accept those lows when they're there and to be able to keep working through it to get to the highs? I have this little video here on the left that I found on Twitter. I think it's very funny. I'm just going to play it for you just to give you, again, an idea of what it's like to decide that entrepreneurship is for you. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the sound. It's just music in the background, so if you can't hear it, don't panic. So we do our best at the Center for Entrepreneurship, and any incubator or any space that supports entrepreneurs is going to do their best to try to help prevent this from happening. But essentially, we know that entrepreneurs, they come in very excited about their idea. They want to get it off the ground. They want to change the world. And then they get out there and it's hard and it's challenging. And sometimes it feels like you got smacked down to the ground. But that's why places like the Center for Entrepreneurship sucks to help get them back up on their feet again and make sure they have the tools they need to keep going. So when we're thinking about advising for that lifestyle, we're really looking for tenacity. So if a student was to come to you and say they're interested in entrepreneurship, they think that that might be, what they'd like to do after school, some of the things I would suggest looking for to know if it's a good fit, the main skills that entrepreneurs should have is a growth mindset. Always looking towards the future and how to grow and how to improve, and kind of within that, the ability to let go of failures and not to see failures as failures, but as a chance to learn and as a chance to grow. Because in entrepreneurship, you are coming up against little failures all the time, but really they're learning opportunities to realize, okay, that didn't work. I need to pivot. I need to maybe figure out a different way to do this, or reach a different audience, or say it a different way. And that really is the process of starting a company, is coming up against all those little obstacles. So we want someone with a strong growth mindset, tenacity, and the ability to take initiative. I think that kind of is an obvious one, but if you're going to be an entrepreneur, there's no one telling you what to do next. There's no one telling you to get up in the morning and go to work. It's really all about initiative taking. So for people who struggle with getting a ball rolling by themselves, or who really need that leadership to support them, entrepreneurship may not be the best way forward for them. The other piece that I have here is the kind of 5 broad categories that entrepreneurship can be broken down into. So while we used to have that kind of one stereotypical idea of who is the entrepreneur, what are they doing, they're out to make a lot of money, they're an engineer, that kind of thing. This is kind of how we're looking at it today. So 5 different categories. The first that I have here being mission driven. This is the entrepreneur who is really driven to improve things for the planet or for their communities. They may be looking to start a charitable organization, a nonprofit, or a business that does benefit society, even if it's a for-profit, but maybe has that social impact piece to it. And they're driven to start the business because they want to make things better. They see a problem in the world and they believe that they have the ability to impact that. So this may not be as much monetary driven. It may be a bit more driven by that idea of the change that they want to see. The next category is the artist or the innovator. As you might have gleaned from my background as an artist, most artists are entrepreneurs. They have to be by the very nature of the work they're doing. And so giving them those entrepreneurial skills really helps with that artist lifestyle. You have to be promoting yourself and running yourself as a brand or as a business. So having entrepreneurial skill really helps in the arts world, whether it's a visual artist, a maker, somebody who's a craftsperson. And also in that category, the innovator, the inventor, someone who's coming up with and creating these new wonderful things that people will enjoy and that will bring joy to people. The opportunist, that would be kind of the category of that traditional idea of somebody who's looking for opportunities. They want to maybe scale a big corporation. They're looking for gaps where there's a huge market, a huge opportunity to make a lot of money, or to really fill a niche where there's a big market available. The expert, this is that category that we see more and more over the age of 55 entering into entrepreneurship. So this is somebody who's worked in a field for a long time. They are an expert. Maybe they're a scientist or researcher. Maybe they've just been working in a field for many years and kind of reached the highest limit they can get to within employment. And then they want to take those skills and take them out to the market themselves and find a way to commercialize their skills and their expertise to actually bring it to market and offer their services as a business. And then finally, the lifestylist. This is one that is sometimes kind of frowned upon or looked down upon in the entrepreneurship world, but it shouldn't be. This is people who are starting a business because it's going to fit the lifestyle that they want to live. So maybe they want to be able to travel, they want to be able to work from anywhere. Maybe they have little kids at home and their number one priority is being able to be available for their children and to be able to be at home. And so they're building their business to work around the lifestyle that they want. Which could take any different form, be any different industry, but really the priority being that flexibility and fitting into the life that they're living. So that's just some ideas to give you about what we think of when we're looking today at entrepreneurs or the potential to become an entrepreneur. So why do our students need innovation skills? Well, we know that by about 2050, there is a risk that half of today's work activity could be automated. So we need to give our students the ability to think creatively and innovatively now so that they can be creating those new jobs and new innovations and new opportunities for the future that can't be automated. Students from all disciplines do benefit from entrepreneurship education and can become successful entrepreneurs. So whether they are, a health and wellness student, a photography student, or a business student, they do have that opportunity to access entrepreneurship education to create something new for themselves and for the world and for the local economy. And as I mentioned, entrepreneurship is quickly becoming a necessary literacy, both for creating your own business, but a lot of employers are looking for these skills. So where do we advise entrepreneurs to start? If you are advising a student who is, maybe kicking around a business idea, not sure where to go next with it, maybe there's something they're passionate about, but they're not sure if they should action on it. The two primary things I would suggest, one is finding other people to work with. So statistically, the more people on your team or the more people you have to work with, the more likely you are to find success. So if you're able to have a partner or even a group of 3 to work on the idea, you're far more likely to be successful, and you're able to find others who complement your strengths. So if you're used to advising students, you may be familiar with something like a strengths finder or strength testing, where a student can figure out kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are. I usually advise my students who are starting a business that they really want to focus in on their strengths and put themselves into a position where they can be actioning on their strengths and then build their team to complement what their strengths are, rather than focusing on their weaknesses and how to improve their weaknesses, instead finding team members who can complement, who maybe have strengths in those other areas. So networking, meeting others who are interested in entrepreneurship, who might also be passionate about the idea, who might also be able to contribute to it, that's a great place to start. Just talking about the idea. Sometimes students can be a bit hesitant to talk about their idea. I've even had meetings where a student is interested in joining the incubator, and I say, well, what's your business idea? And they don't even want to tell me. And I'm like, I can't help you if you don't at least tell me what your business idea is. But sometimes there's kind of this idea that they need to hold on to and protect the idea. But I always encourage, the more you talk about it, the more people you meet, the more you're going to collect different perspectives and viewpoints and find other people to work with. And that really is step one. And then the second thing I would recommend is attend an incubator. So if this student doesn't have a business background or doesn't feel strong on the business side, there are so many support services out there. Almost all of them are free, and it can really help them get started on the right foot with their business. So they can get mentorship to learn from those who have done it before about what to do and what not to do. And they can start validating that business idea while they're still in a safe environment where failure is okay, because they have the supports and they have access to the resources that will allow them to fail in kind of a safe way. And within the incubator, we try to encourage those failures to happen, because that's where you learn the most, and also because you want that to happen before you go out into the world and spend a whole bunch of money trying to bring that business to life. You want them to happen kind of in that safe environment where you've got mentors who can help talk you through it and help you come up with ways to pivot. So if there's 2 things I would say for any entrepreneur who is kind of kicking around the idea of getting started, it would be start talking to other people and trying to find those allies and build a team, and then find a good program that will help you, especially if it's free, like an incubator on a campus. That would be a great place for them to start. There we go. And why I say joining an incubator as well, there is a lot of research trying to understand what works and what doesn't work, which programs help an entrepreneur and which don't. Can we even teach entrepreneurship? Believe it or not, there's tons of scholarship around, should we even be trying to teach entrepreneurship? Is it something that we can even teach? Or is there a way to teach it that will lend to success and other ways that won't lead to success? What we do know for sure is that there are competencies that we can train. So while entrepreneurial success does in many ways rely on the individual's own passion, their own perseverance, whether they are able to have that tenacity to keep going, whether they have that growth mindset, those sorts of things that are a bit more internal, it also relies on some external things. And those are the competencies and the skills where we can really boost them and help them. And through training, coaching, and mentorship, they can grow those competencies. So the main areas, oh goodness, it does it every time. The main areas, the main skills that I would suggest to students that they might want to start honing if they are thinking about starting a business, aside from that kind of internal stuff that they may want to look at, like their own strengths and leadership skills and tenacity, the sort of hard skills that they would want to strengthen, the main areas being financial literacy. So this is obviously good just as a life skill, but financial literacy is incredibly important if you're thinking of starting a business, to feel empowered by the numbers. A lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, they don't want to kind of look at the numbers. It scares them, or they hope that it'll just all work out. But often that's just it's just a symptom of not having the knowledge and not having the literacy to be able to harness that knowledge and use it. So having a strong financial literacy is important to be able to plan, to be able to forecast, and also once the business starts, to be able to look at the data of what is currently happening and actually understand the inner workings of the business. So that's definitely a skill to grow. And the nice thing too about financial literacy is there's tons of free programming out there, whether it's through something like the CRA. Many banks offer financial literacy programming as kind of a social good that they're giving back, especially like Alterna, for example, does a lot of financial literacy training. So it's something that's quite accessible and typically is available out in the market if it's not a part of a student's kind of regular program. Confidence and leadership. So building that leadership skill. I feel that my role as an advisor to entrepreneurs is often just building their confidence. It's sometimes really scary to start a business and you're not sure if you have what it takes to do it. And having that cheerleader behind you who says, yeah, you have what it takes, you can do it, is a huge part to just giving the confidence to be able to start a business. Networking, definitely one of the most important areas to strengthen. If a student is nervous talking to other people, that's going to be really challenging with starting a business. One of the first things we ask our entrepreneurs to do is to go out and talk to 100 potential customers before even thinking about starting their business. And that can be really nerve-wracking, especially I think for this generation. Like, when I was a kid, I used to spend all day on the phone talking to my friends, and now I feel like people are terrified when their phone rings. They don't even think of it as that function of being able to talk on it. So how do we build the comfort with that networking, with talking to people, with setting up, coffee calls and interviews? That is incredibly important for entrepreneurs. Having the confidence to be able to ask someone to sit down and have a call with them and then have that chat is so important. Encouraging students to go to networking events where they could meet other people in their industry, meet other people who might be able to support them along the way, and just meeting other entrepreneurially minded people. It's important to have that network behind you when you do decide to start a business. And then finally, strategic thinking, which I think is something that we're all trying to instill in students no matter what the program, but strategic thinking being a really important one for entrepreneurs. In terms of steps for early planning, if a student is thinking of starting a business, what they need to be thinking about is determining kind of the market, the landscape that they're thinking about entering into, and doing a lot of research. So you can also encourage students, have you really researched this field? Do you have a good understanding of the industry? And something we teach is a pestle analysis, which is it's just kind of a framework for going out and looking at what is the political landscape right now, the economic, social, technology, legal, environmental, what is going on in the world around me, and how is that going to impact if I decide to start a business today? Especially right now during COVID, obviously this is hugely important, because where our students might have been thinking before of starting brick and mortar businesses, maybe getting a physical location on a main street somewhere, now we're saying, okay, does that make the most sense? Do we want to invest in a physical space, especially if people aren't even able to come and buy from us? We also know during COVID, the focus on the environment and sustainability has rapidly changed. Consumers are really interested right now in environmental and sustainable solutions. So how does that shape the future of the business that you might want to be doing? So encouraging them to think about the environment, to start doing that market research. We're also really lucky at Humber that we have business librarians who are able to help them with that market research as well. So if they're not coming to an incubator, they're not coming to the CFE, they can just go to the library, and we have access to lots of databases, and the business librarians are incredible at guiding students on how to use those resources to really understand the business that they're thinking of creating. So where can you refer students? There are a wealth of different resources out there for students who are thinking about starting their own business. I would say if it's a Humber student and they're thinking, okay, maybe I want to start a business in the near future, the first resource would be the library. At Humber, obviously, we're very lucky to have the Humber Library. If for whatever reason they don't want to use that library, they can use the public library. But meeting with librarians, I think, is a huge sort of step one. They can help you with that market research. They can help you do that pestle analysis and see what's the landscape I'm entering into. Is this a good idea? Is now a good time? So I would say librarians and the library is kind of the first go-to just to get that lay of the land and think, okay, do I want to start this business? Is this the right business for me? And is there an opportunity here? So starting with that research, and then if yes, they've done the research, they for sure are ready to start a business or that's where they want to go next, then small business advisory centers or incubators and accelerators are a great place for that development to happen. So municipally, there are a lot of services available. If they're in Toronto, there's Toronto Enterprise. If they're in Mississauga, there's the MBEC, the Mississauga Business Enterprise Center. And these are municipally funded centers that are there to help local businesses get started, especially if they're thinking of starting a physical local business. These are really the types of places that can help support them with that journey. And then the incubators and accelerators. So here at Humber, we have the Center for Entrepreneurship. We're open to supporting all students, all industries, any stage. So we are definitely a great go-to place for students. But if they're looking for additional supports, or maybe they have a business in a really specific industry that they feel like they need more specific help, they can look at some of the universities in Toronto that have a lot of incubators and accelerators as well. So there is a really big ecosystem of these support centers. We're all interconnected. We often meet together and work together. So it is kind of like a big network of places that they can go. And so at Ryerson or U of T, for example, they have multiple incubators that are industry specific. So if somebody is thinking of creating a healthcare solution and it's really specific that they need to talk to mentors who have worked in that space, they want to be able to work with clinicians or doctors or people who have developed medical solutions before, they may want to look for an incubator that is specific to that industry. So they may be better suited looking at U of T or Ryerson in like the medical zones, where they can get that really specific expertise. And then another place just kind of within our ecosystem, Sheridan College also has a great incubator that's open to all industries, but they're specifically focused on social enterprise. So for students who are looking at starting a nonprofit, a charity, something where the whole focus of the venture is really towards social impact, then they may want to look at Sheridan. That's where all their programming is really, really focused. And then once you've kind of grown beyond the incubator, maybe they have already got a business started, they already kind of understand the nuts and bolts, they've been operating a small business and they're really ready to grow it. There are also larger centers where they can go for that next step support. So the three that are kind of in our area, the Mars Discovery Center, which is in downtown Toronto, the Rick Center, which is in Mississauga, and Venture Lab, which is up in Markham. These are regional, so much larger, and they tend to have a focus on tech, technology, but also currently a lot of clean tech, clean energy. They tend to run kind of, I guess, along the lines of the same, what funding is available from the government. They'll have different focuses. So right now, a lot of the focus is around COVID, recovery, healthcare, those kinds of things, but it does sort of change based on trends. But if a student is working on something technology-based, AI, and they really want to grow it to that next level, they can look at those regional innovation centers. But for the average student who's just thinking about starting a business, send them to the Humber CFE. We can talk with them. We can look at what they're thinking, give them advice, give them mentorship, and then we can always refer them to that next step as well. If they want to take it beyond what we can help them with at the CFE, we can make those referrals and get them started somewhere. So please take a moment. I've got a couple more slides here, but take a moment to provide some feedback. You can scan this QR code here. I believe they're also going to throw the link in the chat. So based on this feedback, or based on this session and what we've been talking about so far, I think it takes a moment to fill out the survey. So if you want to get started on it now, we'll just finish up the rest of the session, but make sure that you do provide feedback. I know they're really interested in hearing what you thought both about this session and all the sessions in this advisor training. So take a moment to do that, please. And I'll leave it there just for a second in case you're trying to scan that QR code. I don't want to advance too fast, you can just, I believe you can just take a picture of it with your phone and it will hopefully open up the survey. So just leave that there for one more second. Okay, so now I just want to switch gears a little bit to talk specifically about the CFE, since that's where I am from, and this is a service that not everybody is aware exists at Humber. The CFE, the Center for Entrepreneurship, is really Humber's space to support and educate our future entrepreneurs to help them succeed. We work with all different levels. So students is kind of our primary focus. We work with students in a number of capacities, everything from work integrated learning, providing co-op and placement opportunities with startups, helping guide students themselves on the journey if they're interested in starting a business, but also giving them access to entrepreneurial opportunities just to learn those innovation skills, those transferable skills I was talking about earlier. Things like hackathons or challenges where they're given an innovation problem and they have to come up with solutions in a team and collaborate. That's what we do all year round. So students who are interested in learning those innovation skills, either to start their own business or to kind of set themselves apart in the workforce later as somebody who is an innovator and has those soft skills, they can come to the CFE and engage in all of those different types of opportunities. We also work with alumni, so trying to help support early stage businesses and help them grow, as well as give them access to student talent. So one of the great things about the CFE is really this relationship between established or small startups and our students. It's a beautiful opportunity for work integrated learning to happen, where students who are interested in innovation can work with a startup, and startups who need that support, research, their first perhaps employee, can take from our student talent to help them grow that company. And so we do work with students, alumni, and our local community, but really our focus is, of course, on students and helping them gain those entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial skills. We're mostly focused on early stage ventures, so our expertise is the startup space, how to get started, how to go from idea to getting ready to launch. We have a number of different programs that run throughout the year for those early stage ventures. So the Be Your Own Boss program runs every semester, and that's for students who they don't maybe have their own idea yet, but they want to kind of learn the landscape. How does one start a business, or how does one find the right idea to start their first business? And that's a program that they could join any semester. It runs every semester. And then we have our ICE program, which is going to be running this summer, which is for those students who have already identified that business idea and they really want to build it. So they want to get started, hit the ground running. They've done the research, they've done the thinking, they know that this is the idea, and now they really want to go with it and start the business. And then we do have some pitch competitions throughout the year and other opportunities for students as they start those ventures. We work with all industries, so we're here to serve the entire Humber community and all the different programs that students are coming out of. We offer education and mentorship. That's our main focus. So we're here to offer entrepreneurial education, especially to those students who might not have a business background, and matching them with mentors who are in the industry. So matching them with successful entrepreneurs who have been through it before, can speak to the experience, and offer those diverse perspectives. When we're in person, when we're back on campus, hopefully someday, we do have a beautiful space on the Lakeshore campus. The Center for Entrepreneurship is a physical location where we have access to equipment and technology, and students can come and take advantage of it, both for the space and for networking and meeting other entrepreneurs, but also to take advantage of some of the equipment. There's a focus group room where they can do focus groups. They can access things like a 3D printer, and we're going to be growing more and more the resources that are available there. So it is a great place. Hopefully when we're back on campus, you can come check us out or send students our way. So thank you for your time today. I would love if there's any questions, I'd love to answer them, both about the CFE itself or about entrepreneurship, about the future of employment or advising for entrepreneurship. And I believe the director of the CFE, Cheryl Mitchell, is also on the call. So if there's any questions I can't answer, I'm sure that she can. You can also check out our website. Follow us on social media to see what's going on and to be up to date on the opportunities happening at the CFE. But I'd love to hear if there's any questions or anything that I can chat with you about. Please feel free to ask those now, because I think we've got about 10 minutes left. So if there's anything that you'd like to chat about, please feel free. Not that I can actually see it if you are. Maybe, hold on. I think I can minimize this and maybe I'll be able to see if there's any questions.
Casey, I think most of them have been responded to.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.